Hello, friends. Welcome to my story about how I ended up in Mercy Multiplied. I'm just going to preface this with I am not someone that knows a lot about audio or computers or how to do that kind of stuff, so I'm just recording this on my phone. I am at the park, so you might hear some people in the background or that kind of stuff. So I apologize for any of that might be in here, but I'm just going to get down to the point. So I was in Mercy Multiplied in February of 2018. How I kind of ended up there was I was actually in college full-time before. I was on a full scholarship to a private 4-year university in a city about 3 hours from where I grew up. And it was just really hard because I really didn't have any life skills. And I had been dealing with some really crippling emotional issues. There had been, when I was like 17, right before I was getting ready to go to college, some really traumatic events had come up that had happened about a decade earlier, and it was the repressed memories that came up. And while I tried to seek help for that, I just really was very unprepared for a no-boundary environment. And I grew up in an evangelical Christian home, so I had a lot of boundaries, maybe even too many boundaries, that kind of kept me very sheltered. I did go to a public school growing up, and so I guess that was my only kind of outlet, I guess. But I was very well behaved as a child. I definitely was a people pleaser, you could say. Someone that always wanted to accomplish more, do more. Yeah, so my senior year of high school, I was working a job 25 hours a week. I was in community college. I was in the band. I did theater. I did all these different activities. And yet, I never felt good enough, ever. Ever. And that was the most heartbreaking thing. And then I go on full scholarship to college, and I think everything's going to be better. And I'm still not equipped with emotional skills. So, I think that I looked at a lot of different programs and looking at all the cost of all these different programs. A program that sounds free and Christian was really appealing to my family, so my family was the big push. And because the people-pleasing part of me wanted to make everybody happy and just smooth everything over and stop everybody fighting about, what is she gonna do? It was very chaotic at the time. So I felt like I had no choice but to go. And, during the whole time, or during my time that I was applying, I had discovered the Slate article saying how Mercy Multiplied had been abusive to women in the past. And the fact that they had denied people medication, that they, had prayed the gay away, and all this kind of stuff. As someone that was evangelical, and I would say was strictly evangelical for the first 18 years of their life, I guess it sounded appealing. But then I went off to college and I realized that's not the only way to live your life. So it took me about 6 weeks to apply, which is an expedited timeline. But I was in such a crisis mode. It was such a crisis at the time that it was awful. The whole December to February, it was the December of 2017 to February of 2018 when I left for Mercy Multiplied, it was probably the worst time of my life. So I finally arrived around, I believe it was the 13th or the 14th. I honestly can't remember. A lot of that has kind of blocked itself out of my mind, because I feel like that's a way that our minds kind of protect ourselves in a way. So the first 3 days I cried. The first 3 days I cried. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I just cried. And the staff was absolutely no help. And I had pelvic pain at the time, and I had brought my TENS machine with me. And I had emailed them about my TENS machine, and they're like, yeah, we'll have to keep it in the nurse's office or whatever. But they didn't say that they would only let me use it 10 minutes at a time. So I was only allowed to use it 10 minutes at a time under supervision, which was part of the deal that we had agreed to. But the nurse was like, oh, I'm an OBGYN nurse, and, you know, I know better than you and your doctors. And I'm like, you met me like 2 days ago, and you don't know what's going on. And so they started to deny me medication for my pelvic pain. I believe that was the first thing. So that was the first thing. Then, so before I had came, I had injured my knee. I had a boyfriend in college who was abusive, and I slipped or he pushed me down the stairs, and then I fell on my knee too. And then that aggravated it. And then they had said, well, you're going to go to the gym and do these workouts with us. And I said, okay, that's fine. I just can't put a lot of strain on it. And they said, yeah, but, you know, otherwise you're not participating in our program. You know, I can't remember the exact word that they used, but they used non-compliance. That was the word that they used. They used non-compliance. And so I didn't leave the program of my own accord. They kicked me out and gave me less than 24 hours to leave. It was non-compliance that they said. I never did anything egregious. I did stay, I think it was almost 5 months to the day, or something like that, like 5 months to the day. It was right after Nancy Alcorn had come, because I guess they didn't want to upset people too much. But right before I left, they had told me not to tell any of the girls why I was leaving, because it would upset the other girls and disrupt their treatment, which I felt was kind of awful. Like, they had just disrupted mine so abruptly. And what they had told me was, like, they had been saying for weeks and weeks and weeks, oh, you're getting ready to graduate, you're getting ready to graduate, you're getting ready to graduate. And then they had just pulled the rug out from underneath me, and that was really upsetting. As someone, you know, that had strived to be the perfect Mercy girl. But part of me had always been asking questions and being like, well, this doesn't make any sense. Like, you're stopping and taking staples out of my mail, but you're giving me stuff with staples in it. So are we allowed to have staples or not? And they're like, you're non-compliant with our program. And I'm like, but I'm just asking real questions. So are we allowed to have staples, or are we not allowed to have staples? Or things like, you know, things like other girls got special treatment or this kind of stuff. And, you know, some of the staff was way nicer to some of the girls than the other girls. Like when some of the girls were having panic attacks, you know, they got staff to come over and say stuff to them. And I'm like, can I just have my medication, because I'm getting ready to have a panic attack. And they're like, no, you just need to pray about it, and God will save you from your panic attack. You know, here's some prayers about it. I had lots of different sheets with prayers on it, because the prayers were somehow going to make me not anxious. But really, other than that, they didn't give me any tools to deal with the anxiety. And I did have a card with some skills on it, but then they punished me for using the skills. Like one day we were sitting in class and, for whatever reason, the video was really, really triggering to me. And I asked if we could turn it off, and they said, no, sit there. And it was, if I remember correctly, it was a video of a conference, and the speaker had asked the participants to turn to each other and give each other back rubs. And a back rub was part of the way that I was sexually molested. And I asked them to turn it off because that had been very triggering for me. And they had said, no, just deal with it. So I got out of the room, and now I know it's a TIP skill, which is a DBT skill, which is temperature, increased exercise, pressure, exercise. And they punished me for that. So I got I think it was extra dish duty that night for going and using a TIP skill and not telling them where I was going. But at that time with my panic attacks, I became nonverbal because I didn't really have skills to cope and be verbal because the anxiety was just so awful. But, they would never watch a video about food because, these girls that were suffering with these eating disorders, they were just giving verses about how good food is to God. And that was supposed to be eating disorder treatment, which, I've been to other programs, and these other programs would never just give you a statement and just say, that's your treatment. Good luck, with food for the rest of your life. It almost makes me laugh sometimes how I sit there and I think about it and how I'm like, this is woefully under-preparing people to sit there and just be like, here's your Bible verses and you don't need any other skills in life, just rely on God. And I feel like this is how codependency forms within the church. And as someone with borderline, this is definitely how the codependency started to form, was like, oh, I can just rely on God. Oh, I can just rely on other people. Oh, I can just, at some point in my brain, it just made sense to me. Like, oh, I'll just rely on God for this. I don't need anybody else. I just have God. And God loves me no matter what, so I can do whatever. Or people, I'll fix someone with love. I'll just fix them with love. I don't know, that made sense to me somewhere in my brain. So, a couple other things that happened to me while I was at Mercy Multiplied was phone calls were listened into. So the state of California says by law you are required to have private phone calls, but what they would do was line up all the phones in the hallway and then tell you that you had 15 minutes to the second to take a phone call. And some of the girls would tell people their names and, be like, oh, so-and-so's in the program, she's from here, and then look this girl up on Facebook. And, some of the girls were leaving desperately abusive situations. And for the other girls to walk around and tell, friends and family at home to, oh, look so-and-so up on Facebook, this is her name and this is where she's from. It isn't confidential. Staff would go back there and listen in, sit in the offices and listen in. Sometimes staff would be like, I heard you say this on your phone call with your mom. That's not really happening here, kind of like the gaslighting situation. Staff would open mail, which is another thing that California law requires you to have that's confidential. California law also requires that you hold on to your money, which they did not do. They had you sign a waiver signing away all these rights. So every other program that I've been to, and I've been to some of the other programs around the country for women with mental health problems, including borderline specific problems, they either let you hold on to your money or they'll put it in a safe or a lockbox. That way, if you go on an outing or you want to go buy something from the vending machines, you can just ask for it and they'll give you, your money or whatever. Mercy Multiplied was so strict. When we would go on these outings, or what they would call mall, which I think is a dumb name, even if we weren't going to a mall, they would check your bag. They would make you shake your bra out, shake your socks out. They would check every single coin that you had. If you were more than 25 cents off, you had to stay back the next week. So it was like a reward. So if you were more than 25 cents off, you couldn't, and you were not allowed to have your ID. So while I was there, it was during tax time, and I had to get my ID, and they actually had to get the program director to okay for me to have my ID to call my family so that they could get my tax refund for me. So, you know, it's really not good what they do to the women in that program. Another thing that really is not okay is the way that they treat people with medical issues. And you know, they aren't a medical facility, and that's fine. But even people with basic level medical issues, they cannot treat. Like, I'm talking about like chronic problems. So I have IBS, and they were telling me that, oh, we're not an IBS treatment facility. We can't even give you medicine. There's not enough staff for us to give you medication. So I would have to eat like really spicy food, and it would trigger the GERD, like the esophageal reflux disease, which is, you know, really continuous heartburn. It's really bad. It hurts when you eat spicy food. It hurts when you lay down. You can't drink lots of pop. At least I can't. I'm not sure if it's the same for everybody, but there's a couple of different things to alleviate it. So like taking a medicine every day, and then sometimes Tums or that kind of stuff can help alleviate the symptoms. And they would say, we can't give you Tums because it's a medication and we don't have enough staff. So they would leave like 35 girls with 2 staff for the whole weekend. And apparently that's acceptable under California law because they're not a medical facility. But if you're having girls that have serious mental health issues who are victims, and this is according to their website, of sex trafficking, anxiety, eating disorders, you name it, they can treat it there supposedly, and you're leaving girls with 2 staff for 35 women, I'm a little bit concerned about your ability to care for these kind of people. In every other program that I had been at least there was a nurse on call at 24/7, you know, and then the doctors were on call 24/7 too. So it wasn't just like, you know, they were kind of left for themselves. Another thing that I was really concerned about Mercy Multiplied is kind of and this is something that I personally, you know, I kind of lost my faith after this, was the evangelical thinking. And I did grow up evangelical, so a lot of these things made sense to me at the time. So like the modesty and the, you know, we're going to read the Bible every day and we're going to pray and all that kind of stuff. And hey, if that's your thing, I really can't say anything about it, but you weren't allowed any other outside media because it's going to distract from God. So there was no TV, no newspapers, no outside books. There was nothing like that. So you were only allowed PG movies that were approved by them and under. So it was a lot of like animated Disney movies. If your family sent you newspaper clippings, you weren't allowed those. We weren't allowed to use the computers except to look up, I think it was churches and places to live after your 90 days. It was honestly the most isolating place that I've ever lived, and it was so sad because all I wanted to do was I wanted to talk to the people at church. You weren't able to. You were told that it's in your best interest that you're isolated, because the outside world is going to influence you in a bad way. So they have to keep you isolated and safe. But how are we going to be able to cope with the outside world if we're not exposed to it, you know? And they're like, oh, it's the little Mercy bubble. You love it here. It's so great. No, we don't love it here. I didn't. That was probably the most miserable 5 months of my life. So there were a lot of other things that happened. This is just the first episode. But man. So when I left, they were telling me I couldn't even call my family. They made me book a ticket without even calling my family. So I had never lived on my own without their help at all. So I had been living at college even during the summers and stuff. So my family was totally unprepared for it. They booked a trip to come out. And Mercy was like, yeah, go ahead and come out. I didn't tell them I was on, I guess they called it probation, because it's it's their way of saying, if you don't shape up, we're going to kick you out. That was what they called probation. So I didn't tell them I was on probation because I wanted to be perfect and great and make it to Mercy's graduation, where the whole day stops for you, and you know, the staff, they take you out to get your nails done and your hair done and your makeup done, and you get to pick out a dress, and they give you a ring, and everything looks so great, and you know, everyone that was part of your Mercy journey comes, and I wanted that. I wanted that at the time. I wanted to make everybody happy, and that was what I wanted to do. But at the same time, Christianity felt to me like an old pair of jeans, and it was just it was squishing me and crushing me, and it just, it didn't feel right. It was too tight, too constrict. It just never felt right to me, because here was what the idealized Christian was someone who was pious and good and pure, and someone that prayed, and someone that studied the Bible and believed it, and I always doubted. And they were like, don't be like Doubting Thomas. Doubting Thomas, you know, Doubting Thomas is in the Bible for a reason. And they would say things like, good Christians, you know, good Christians don't have these problems like depression. It's the spirit of depression trying to come over you. But good Christians have problems too. It's not like you become a Christian and automatically everything's great. I mean, look at Paul. Paul's one of the greatest examples of, just because you're a Christian, not everything's great. So Paul had, quote unquote, a thorn in his side, and biblical scholars believe that this was a physical ailment, believed to be like a renal disease, which is a disease of the kidneys, or an eye disease or something like that. So a physical ailment, and 3 times he prayed for God to take this away from him, and he did not. It was to keep him humble and grounded to God. And I brought this up a couple of times, and they were like, well, and just moved on to somebody else, because these are questions that we couldn't answer. And these are questions that we might not be able to answer. But to tell people that are hurting and that are struggling that because you weren't healed, you didn't pray hard enough, you didn't believe hard enough, is damaging to someone that isn't getting healed, you know. And one of the things that was, I think, one of the worst things that I've ever heard is, if we can't fix you, nobody can. You know what? I don't think that people with chronic mental health issues are ever, quote unquote, fixed. It's just something that we learn to live with, or learn to cope with. You know, I've been to great mental health programs, and I can tell you that every day I have to get up and choose to cope, because it would be a lot easier for me to get back in bed and pull the covers over my head and choose not to cope. It's not like I'm ever going to wake up and be magically healed. So I think the expectation has to be adjusted for the reality. It'd be nice to, be magically healed, but it's a chronic illness. It's not a demon. We can't just exorcise it out. That was a very antiquated way of looking at it, but there are actual ways to make it better, like teaching people skills. Medication is a way to help cope for people that medication's an option for. So like getting on the right medication has significantly improved my life. Learning DBT has significantly helped my life. Boundaries with family has significantly improved my life. Finding a good support system has significantly helped my life. These are things that are more attainable for people with chronic illnesses, rather than saying, if we can't fix you, nobody can. We fix the unfixable. I think that that's an unrealistic expectation for people that have a mental illness. Saying that, if we didn't fix you, you didn't pray hard enough. I don't know that that's the correct way to go about it. That really hurt me. And even after I left Mercy, that was something that stuck with me, was like, how unfixable am I? I must be really broken. That the place that fixes the unfixable can't fix me. I must be really unlovable. I must be really broken. That was what I thought of myself. That was what that instilled in me. Apparently after you leave Mercy, these women are completely cured. And I was sitting in the next program I went to, and the one therapist says, you're not going to leave here after 28 days and be completely healed. And I was like, that's news to me, because for the last 5 months I've been fed, you're going to walk out of here completely better. I don't think anyone with a chronic illness, diabetes, depression, whatever, is going to walk out of somewhere and be completely healed. It's an everyday battle, at least for me. I can't, let me put it this way. For those people that it is an everyday struggle, telling someone that you're going to be completely better when you walk out of this doctor's office, or completely better when you walk out of this program, it gives people either a false sense of hope, or you completely sound like a loon. And these people sounded completely like a loon to me. Well, they sound like a loon to me now. At the time, I was like, thank God I can be done with this and back to my life, or the life that I expected to live when I was 19. I just expected to be done with it and all back to being myself, and, back to going to college and finishing this and living the life that, 15-year-old me had planned to be. But it didn't turn out that way. And not that it's bad, but it's just different. And I was talking with my friend the other day, and she asked me, what's been the best year of your life? And I said, this last one. She said, really? And I said, yeah. She's like, what's been so great about it? And I said, I got my own place. I got promoted in my job. I bought my first car. And I did it all by myself, with support. She said, that's great. I said, thanks. And you know what? All of this has made me a stronger person. I don't do this to say, woe is me. I guess if anything, I do this to say, if I can do it, you can do it. Because I was there too. One day, I tried to hurt myself. But you know what? It's so cliche to say. Things get better. Sometimes. Some days they're great. Some days they're okay. Some days there's not so great. But hopefully, maybe we're not going to be completely happy, but we're going to find sometime that the days are a little bit better, or sometime that the days are a little bit better than not. And I guess that's all that we can really strive for in life, is none of us are perfect. None of us have every day is a great day. But even living with mental illness, we can just strive to have some better days. That's it. That's all we're looking for. I think that's all that we're all looking for in life. And you know, growing up evangelical, everyone was like, what's your purpose? What's your purpose? You know, God wants me to be an author, or God wants me to be this, or God wants me to be that. I don't know. Do any of us know a purpose? I think we're all trying to figure that out. So, thanks, friends, for listening to my first episode of how I ended up in Mercy Multiplied and a little bit about that. So, feel free to ask any questions, leave any comments. I know it was a little rambly. It was kind of the first episode. This is the kind of experiment. So, you know, took me a lot of guts to make this, so don't be too harsh, I hope. You know, I guess one of the things that I've learned is the bravest thing to do sometimes is just do it. Just make it. Just make the video. Just go to the appointment. Just talk to the person. Just tell them what you really need in life. And maybe in this, and maybe in hearing others' experiences too, we can all grow as people and heal as a collective, because this is not a great experience for me, and it wasn't a great experience for many others. So I hope that we can all grow and learn as people. So thanks for listening, and have a wonderful day or evening. It's evening where I'm at, so have a great evening. All right. Thanks a lot for listening.